Literacy and identity are two very complex concepts with ever-evolving definitions. The discussion about what these concepts are is endless, so for the sake of discussion, I've used select definitions from Merriam-Webster and freedictionary.com. Identity is defined as the distinguishing character or personality of an individual. Also, as the set of behavioral or personal characteristics by which an individual is recognizable as a member of a group. Literacy is defined as the ability to read and write. Pondering these two concepts, I came to a not so astonishing conclusion that they are inextricably linked to one another. In an article written by David Kirkland, he describes literacy as the practice of shaping identities and as a tool for participating in culturally valued experiences. And in the book Literacy in American Lives, Debbie Brandt says literacy abilities are nested in and sustained by larger social and cultural activity. From these quotes and the aforementioned definitions, I've concluded that both concepts are culturally situated and socially constructed. In the following, I'd like to explore the ways in which literacy has either shaped or had an effect on several aspects of my own identity. Literacy has played a significant role in my family life by bringing me closer to different family members. My home has always been filled with books of all different types and can be found in almost every room. My mother has been the largest influence in my life for developing an appreciation for the written word. For as long as I can remember, she has always been a voracious reader, even more so than myself. She is one of those readers that juggles 3 or 4 books at a time. As a child, my mother and I both read the same book series. It served as a bonding point for us then and continues to do so today. Reading has served a similar function with my siblings. With my brothers, it's usually manga, comics, and other science fiction stories. We would all read them at the same time, sometimes at different times, but when we get together, discussing these stories is usually the center of conversation. While I have always been primarily a reader, I have always wanted to be a writer as well. When I was young, writing was my first choice and occupation. I spent a good deal of time writing my own stories in a blank book that had been given to me by my grandmother. As I've grown up, I found that I wanted to be identified as a writer more than I actually wanted to engage in the activity. Other than journaling and a couple classes, I hardly ever wrote, especially not creatively. My brother and cousin have recently given me new life as a writer and an instant audience. They are both musicians, are in need of someone to describe their music and writing to get people interested in listening. I've had the privilege of doing so, and it has been exciting. It gives me a chance to write creatively, informatively, and persuasively. The idea that this writing will be public is both terrifying and exhilarating, but I've enjoyed the experience a great deal. There are mounds of research that support the notion that males struggle with literacy more than females. A recent study published in the journal Gender Issues points out that significant gender gap when it comes to basic literacy skills. Part of it comes from how boys are socialized. From a young age, boys are always taught to be active. They're supposed to be out running around, tackling each other, hitting their heads, and scraping their knees. Sitting still and reading is not supposed to play a major role in a male's life once they are able to get up and run around. Like many boys, I had a rough and tumble upbringing. I played outside, played sports, and I hit my head and scraped my knees plenty of times. However, I'd always been drawn to the art of storytelling. Oftentimes, my rough and tumble play would be based on the superhero and adventure stories I was engaging with at the time. I still read those stories today, but we won't get into that now. As I got older, my desire to write waned, but my love of reading only grew. I still got dirty, I still played sports, but I made sure to carve out quiet time to enjoy a book. Unfortunately, growing up as a black male has presented certain challenges and frustrations. While I've rarely had to deal with overt and explicit forms of racism, I have had to combat stereotypes my entire life. Literacy is seen as an intellectual endeavor. One of the major stereotypes of a black male is a lack of intellect at worst, and at best, employing a mode of intellect that is not useful in mainstream white society. To take this a step further, a black male that does show an affinity for literacy is seen by some people, both black and non-black, as trying to be white. While these ideas have caused me distress at times, it has never been enough to deter my interest and love for literacy. I have always been teased in jest for the big fancy words that I used, and to my closest friends, I embrace my role as a brainy geek. Also, as a result of my incongruency with the stereotype, it has helped to inspire a sense of individuality and a historical sense in that I felt like I connected with prominent black figures throughout history that have used their intellect to advance the status of blacks in America. One particular figure is Frederick Douglass. Reading about how he risked his life to become literate and knowing that many other blacks did the same at the time left quite the impression on me. The ability to read and write is closely tied to socioeconomic status. It's the idea that the more literate an individual is, the better chance of entering secondary education. This in turn typically leads to a better paying or more stable job than an individual without a secondary degree. While both my parents entered college, neither one of them completed their degree. Their lives were sidetracked by trying to provide for their children. I think their experiences in secondary education made them realize the importance of literacy, and its significance was instilled in my siblings and me. My love of reading and writing throughout my youth did help me academically, and as a result, I did attain a college degree and got the occupation I've wanted since I was a teenager. While I'm more educated in the traditional sense and in a more flexible financial situation than my parents at the same age, it has yet to be determined if I'm able to provide for a family in the same way that they did for me. As much as I've appreciated literacy throughout my life, I have also always been an athlete. Again, I've had to deal with and dismantle stereotypes about what it means to be an active, athletic person. Based on the high school template, the typical jock abhors any literary practice that does not enhance their performance on the field, the court, track, etc. They are just supposed to be meat-headed oafs that intentionally pay as little attention to academics so as not to be mistaken for a nerd or geek. The sport is all that is supposed to matter. My public persona in high school was always tied to basketball. I was by no means a star, but I was the guy that played basketball. It's what I was most known for. People were always surprised to find me reading during lunchtime rather than socializing with friends. I was met with a great deal of shock when words started to circulate that I wanted to become an English teacher. Like with race, this reaction of shock and surprise has fueled a desire to be my own person and to avoid being put into an easily definable category. At the end of this exploration, it's clear how literacy plays a major factor in the way I perceive myself and how others perceive me. At times, I've employed my literacy skills to become part of certain social groups like academia, nerdy subcultures, or progressive Negroes. And other times, I've used it to distance myself from stereotypes involving race, class, gender, and ability. While I've been bothered by the stereotypical boxes I've often found people trying to fit me in, I've also enjoyed the way in which people have had to adjust to the fact that I didn't fit in said boxes. It's also served as motivation to continue to return to the world of literacy and the benefits that come with it, and has inspired me to become a complex, multifaceted individual.